Hello students, today we shall be taking up the explanation of the chapter Silk Road. This has been written by Nick Middleton. This has been taken from your class 11 NCERT book Hornbill. Now on this first slide you can see this is a beautiful visual of Mount Kailash, and the map tells you about the Silk Road. So Silk Road or Silk Route, this was an ancient network of trade routes, and this was formally established during the Han dynasty of China. The trade routes connected China, as you can see in the map, and the Far East with the Middle East and Europe, and it was also known as Royal Road. This is the writer of this article, Silk Road, Nick Middleton, award-winning geographer, writer, presenter, environmental scientist, and university lecturer. He was born in London. In this travelogue by Nick Middleton, the reader enjoys the scenic beauty of Mount Kailash, the captivating, mesmerizing beauty, along with the travails that the author faces in this journey of his, captures the essence of this lesson. All right. Now, you must know, children, that there is really no substitute of reading the complete chapter and understanding it. So, let us start quickly. A flawless. Flawless is something which does not have any flaw. A flawless half moon floated in a perfect blue sky on the morning we said our goodbyes. Please observe the beauty of language that has been employed by the author. Extended banks of cloud like long French loaves glowed pink as the sun emerged to splash the distant mountain tops with a rose-tinted blush. So you can have a look at the simile. He is comparing the banks of clouds like long French loaves, and he is saying that they glowed pink as the sun emerged to splash the distant mountain tops with a rose-tinted blush. Such a beautiful explanation, right? Now that we were leaving Ravu, Ravu is this place where the author has started his journey. Lamo is one of the localites over there. So she said that she wanted to give me a farewell present. One evening I had told her, I refers to the narrator through Daniel. Daniel is the narrator's driver, that I was heading towards Mount Kailash to complete the Kora. Now, Kora is, you can call it a parikrama, you can call it that meditation that the Buddhist monks, take up. So, and she had said that I ought to get some warmer clothes. And in the meaning is in English, if you want to say, walk all the way around or circumambulation, that is Kora. So you will come across a lot of local words in Tibet, which I'll be giving you the English meanings of the same words, so no problem. So she had said that I ought to get some warmer clothes because it will be cold up there. So after ducking back into her tent, she emerged carrying one of the long-sleeved sheepskin coats that all men wore. Satan sized me up as we clambered into his car. Yes, he declared Drogba, sir. Okay. So we took a shortcut to get off the Shantang. So why did he say a Drogba, sir? Because once he'll wear it, he'll look like a Drogba. He took Drogba refers to a shepherd in English. We took a shortcut to get off the Shantang. Satan knew a route that would take us southwest, almost directly towards Mount Kailash. It involved crossing several fairly high mountain passes. He said, but no problem, sir, he assured us, if there is no snow. And what was the likelihood of that? I asked him, not knowing, sir, until we get there. Now, you see, when you are traveling there in the mountains, you actually do not know. The weather is really unexpected. Snowfall can take place anytime. And so therefore, you really cannot, even estimate about the time that you will take in reaching the top. From the gently rolling hills of Rahu, the shortcut took us across vast open plains with nothing in them except a few gazelles. The image of a gazelle is also mentioned, is also there in the slide. You can have a look. That would look up from nibbling the arid pasture and frown before bounding away into the void. Void is the emptiness. So you can again imagine that they would, they are nibbling those arid pastures, and they would frown. Why would they frown? Because they are, watching this vehicle of ours and they are disturbed by the tourists, right? So, and then they would just quickly run away or walk away into the void. Further on, where the plains became more stony than grassy, a great herd of wild ass came into view. Satan told us we were approaching them long before they appeared. Kyang, Kyang is again a wild ass, he said, pointing towards a far off pall of dust. When we drew near, I could see the herd galloping en masse. Okay, en masse is all together. When we drew near, I could see the herd galloping en masse, wheeling and turning in tight formation as if they were practicing maneuvers on some predetermined course. Plumes, this is pronounced as plumes. Plumes of dust billowed into the crisp, clean air. As hills started to push up once more from the rocky wilderness, we passed solitary drogbas, okay, shepherds, tending their flocks, sometimes men, sometimes women. These well wrapped figures. Why are they well wrapped? They are well wrapped because it's cold and they are well clad. They are wearing various layers of woolens. So the author says, well wrapped figures would pause and stare at our car occasionally, waving as we passed. When the track took us close to their animals, the sheep would take evasive action. They would veer their way, so they would change their direction, basically veering away from the speeding vehicle. We we passed nomads, dark tents pitched in splendid isolation, usually with a huge black dog, a Tibetan mastiff, standing guard. These beasts would cock is tilt their great heads when they became aware of our approach and fix us in their sights. As we continued to draw closer, they would explode into action, speeding directly towards us like a bullet from a gun and nearly as fast. These shaggy refers to rough and tough, rough mainly. Shaggy monsters, blacker than the darkest night, usually wore bright red collars and barked furiously, angrily, with massive jaws. They were completely fearless of our vehicle, shooting straight into our path, causing Satan to brake and swerve. Swerve is when he was changing his direction. The dog, now the dog here refers to the Tibetan Mastiff, would make chase for 100 meters or so before easing off, having seen us off the property. It wasn't difficult to understand why ferocious Tibetan Mastiffs became popular in China's imperial courts as hunting dogs, brought along the Silk Road in ancient times as tribute from Tibet. By now, we could see snow-capped mountains gathering on the horizon. We entered a valley where the river was wide and mostly clogged with ice, brilliant white and glinting. Glinting is reflecting in the sunshine. Please try and visualize this, okay? So, till the time you start visualizing and you transport yourselves into that beautiful, in the middle of those, Mount Kailash, Lake Mansarovar, till that time you won't be able to enjoy the lesson. The trail here refers to the river, hugged its bank, twisting with the meanders as we gradually gained height and the valley sides closed in. The turns became sharper and the ride bumpier. Satan now in third gear as we continued to climb. The track moved away from the icy river, laboring through steeper slopes that sported big rocks daubed is daubed, smeared with patches of bright orange lichen. Lichen is a plant. Beneath the rocks, hunks of snow clung on in the near permanent shade. I felt the pressure building up in my ears, held my nose, snorted and cleared them. We struggled round another tight bend and Satan stopped. We had opened his door and jumped out of his seat before I realized what was going on. Snow, said Daniel as he too exited the vehicle, letting in a breath of cold air as he did so. Now, this is going to be the first blockage that they are going to come across. A swathe of swathe refers to a broad strip of. A swathe of the white stuff lay across the track in front of us, stretching for maybe 15 meters above, sorry, not above, before it pettered out and the dirt trail reappeared. Okay, before it decreased. The snow continued on either side of us, smoothing the abrupt bank on the upside side. The bank was too steep for our vehicle to scale, so there was no way round the snow patch. I joined Daniel as Satan stepped onto the encrusted snow and began to slither and slide forward. Admire the beauty of Nick Middleton's, account of this travelogue of his. Stamping his foot from time to time to ascertain how sturdy it was. I looked at my wristwatch. We were 5,210 meters above sea level. So look at the things that he is trying to, he is trying to be confident. The way he is stamping his foot and the way he is getting down from the car and, getting rid of the snow, covering it with the soil. All these things are important. The snow didn't look too deep to me, but the danger wasn't its depth. So basically, if you have ever taken up this kind of journey, you would know that icing, once the icing has taken place, you cannot drive your vehicle because there is always this risk of, slipping and falling off. So the car could even turn over, he suggested, as he saw Satan grab handfuls of dirt and fling them across the frozen surface. We both pitched in, and when the snow was spread with soil, Daniel and I stayed out of the vehicle to lighten Satan's load. So they even get down of the car so that Satan is able to, drive. He backed up and drove towards the dirty snow, eased the car onto its icy surface and slowly drove its length without apparent difficulty. 10 minutes later, now this is going to be another blockage for them. We stopped at another blockage. Not good, sir, Satan announced as he jumped out again to survey the scene. This time he decided to try and drive round the snow. The slope was steep and studded with major rocks. Studded is full of rocks, but somehow Satan negotiated them. His four-wheel drive vehicle lurking from one obstacle to the next. In so doing, he cut off one of the hairpin bends, regaining the trail further up where the snow had not drifted. I checked my watch again as we continued to climb in the bright sunshine. We crept past 5,400 meters and my head began to throb horribly. Now you see they are going up, okay? So the oxygen level is low. So you have to drink water constantly so that you are not dehydrated. And many people have this problem of headaches, nausea, and even, they are gasping for their breath. So different people have different sorts of problems when they go up, right now you can see that they are 5,500 meters above the sea level. I took gulps from my water bottle, which is supposed to help a rapid ascent. We finally reached the top of the pass at 5,515 meters. It was marked by a large cairn of rocks festooned with white silk scarves and ragged prayer flags. So basically now they have reached there, and there is this cairn of rocks. The image you can see. Festooned is decorated with white silk scarves because of the tradition. People who come over there, they must be leaving, tying these scarves over there as a way of, praying. So we all took a turn round the cairn in a clockwise direction, as is the tradition, and Satan checked the tires on his vehicle. So he must be checking the air, are we short of, you have to make sure that there is perfect air in the tires so that it doesn't puncture on the way. He stopped at the petrol tank and partially unscrewed the top, which emitted a loud hiss. The lower atmospheric pressure was allowing the fuel to expand. It sounded dangerous to me. Maybe, sir, Satan laughed, but no smoking. So, when you are going up, you are at a higher level and the oxygen levels are much lesser. Drinking alcohol and smoking, these are the two things that one should avoid, because these can lead to extreme dehydration, and people can even faint. My headache soon cleared as we careered down the other side of the pass. It was 2 o'clock by the time we stopped for lunch. We ate hot noodles inside a long canvas tent, part of a work camp erected beside a dry salt lake. The plateau is pockmarked with salt flats and brackish lakes, vestiges of the Tethys Ocean, which bordered Tibet before the great continental collision that lifted it skyward. So you can just have a look at that, map which I have put over there. So Tethys, this was an ocean which was formerly separating the subcontinents of Gondwana and Laurasia. Okay, and this is basically the present Mediterranean. All right, so this one was a hive of activity. Men with pickaxes and shovels trudging back and forth in their long sheepskin coats and salt encrusted boots all wore sunglasses against the glare as a steady stream of blue trucks emerged from the blindingly white lake laden with piles of salt. By late afternoon, we had reached the small town of Hor, back on the main east-west highway that followed the old trade route from Lhasa to Kashmir. Daniel, who was returning to Lhasa, found a ride in a truck, so Satan and I bade him farewell. Outside a tire repair shop, we had suffered 2 punctures in quick succession on the drive down from the Salt Lake, and Satan was eager to have them fixed since they left him with no spares. Besides, the second tire he had changed had been replaced by the one that was as smooth as my bald head. So there is this subtle humor here that is involved. As smooth as my bald head, that's a simile. Now, this was a grim, miserable place, Hor, and there was no vegetation whatsoever, just dust and rocks liberally scattered with years of accumulated refuse, which was unfortunate given that the town sat on the shore of Lake Mansarovar, Tibet's most venerated stretch of water. Ancient Hindu and Buddhist cosmology pinpoints Mansarovar as the source of 4 great Indian rivers: the Indus, the Ganges, the Satluj, and the Brahmaputra. Actually, only the Satluj flows from the lake, but the headwaters of the others all rise nearby on the flanks. Flanks means at the side of Mount Kailash. We were within striking distance of the great mountain, and I was eager to forge ahead. But I had to wait. Satan told me to go and drink some tea in Ho's only cafe. Now, when you go to such places, you will see that the cafe, the eating joints, there are not many such, eating joints or cafes out there. So there was only one cafe over there. Like all the other buildings in town, this was also constructed from badly painted concrete and had 3 broken windows. The good view of the lake through one of them helped to compensate for the drought. I was served by a Chinese youth in military uniform who spread the grease around on my table with a filthy rag before bringing me a glass and a thermos of tea. So obviously it was not a very clean place. Okay. Half an hour later, Satan relieved me from my solitary confinement, and we drove past a lot more rocks and rubbish westwards out of town towards Mount Kailash. My experience in Ho came as a stark contrast to accounts I had read of earlier travelers' first encounters with Lake Mansarovar. Ekai Kawaguchi, a Japanese monk who had arrived there in 1900, was so moved by the sanctity of the lake that he burst into tears. A couple of years later, the hallowed waters, the holy waters basically, had a similar effect on Swin Hedden, who was a Swede, who wasn't prone to sentimental outbursts. So both these people had a different experience altogether, and obviously they were quite moved by the sanctity, by the purity of the lake, by the serenity of the place, and they were so affected by it, they were so moved by it that they had burst into tears. However, the narrator's experience is quite different altogether. If his experience is compared to these two, it was completely different. It was dark by the time we finally left again, and after 10:30 p.m. we drew up outside a guest house in Darchen for what turned out to be another troubled night. Kicking around in the open-air rubbish dump that passed for the town of Ho had set off my cold once more, though, if truth be told, it had never quite disappeared with my herbal tea. One of my nostrils was blocked again, and as I lay down to sleep, I wasn't convinced that the other would provide me with sufficient oxygen. My watch told me I was at 4,760 meters. It wasn't much higher than Ravu, and there I had been gasping for oxygen several times every night. I had grown accustomed to these nocturnal disturbances by now, but they still scared me. Nocturnal would refer to at night. Tired and hungry, I started breathing through my mouth. After a while, I switched to single nostril power, which seemed to be admitting enough oxygen. But just as I was drifting off, I woke up abruptly, suddenly. Something was wrong. My chest felt strangely heavy, and I sat up. A movement that cleared my nasal passages almost instantly and relieved the feeling in my chest. Curious, I thought. I lay back down and tried again. Same result. I was on the point of disappearing into the land of Nod when something told me not to. Land of Nod would refer to that he was about to sleep, but then something told him not to do so. It must have been those emergency electrical impulses again, but this was not the same as on previous occasions. This time I wasn't gasping for breath. I was simply not allowed to go to sleep. Sitting up once more immediately made me feel better. I could breathe freely and my chest felt fine. But as soon as I lay down, my sinuses filled and my chest was odd. I tried propping myself upright against the wall, but now I couldn't manage to relax enough to drop off. I couldn't put my finger on the reason, but I was afraid to go to sleep. A little voice inside me was saying that if I did, I might never wake up again. So I stayed awake all night. Satan took me to the Darchin Medical College the following morning. The medical college at Darchin was new and looked like a monastery from the outside, with a very solid door that led into a large courtyard. We found the consulting room, which was dark and cold and occupied by a Tibetan doctor who wore none of the paraphernalia that I had been expecting. No white coat, he looked like any other Tibetan with a thick pullover and a woolly hat. When I explained my sleepless symptoms and my sudden aversion to lying down, he shot me a few questions while feeling the veins in my wrist. It is a cold, he said finally through Satan, a cold and the effects of altitude. I'll give you something for it. I asked him if he thought I would recover enough to be able to do the Kora. Oh yes, he said, you will be fine. I walked out of the medical college clutching a brown envelope stuffed with 15 screws of paper, okay, those short pieces of paper. I had a 5-day course of Tibetan medicine, which I started right away. I opened an after breakfast package and found it contained a brown powder that I had to take with hot water. It tasted just like cinnamon. The contents of the lunchtime and bedtime packages were less obviously identifiable. Both contained small spherical brown pellets. Pellets will be those small rounded compressed mass of a substance. You can, like, if you have seen those fish food pellets also are available. They looked suspiciously like sheep dung, but of course I took them. That night, after my first full day's course, I slept very soundly like a log, not a dead man. Okay, so he responds to the medicine and Satan. Now we'll see. Let's see. Once he saw that I was going to live, Satan left me to return to Lhasa. As a Buddhist, he told me he knew that it didn't really matter if I passed away, but he thought it would be bad for business. Yes, you see, a tourist, dying over there. So it will be bad for his business as he is a guide. Okay. Darchin didn't look so horrible after a good night's sleep. It was still dusty, partially derelict. Derelict is poor conditions and punctuated by heaps of rubble and refuse, but the sun shone brilliantly in a clear blue sky, and the outlook across the plain to the south gave me a vision of the Himalayas commanded by a huge snow-capped mountain. So this is Gurla Mandata from first view of Mount Kailash, and then the next image is that of the bustling town of Darchin. Now after Satan left, Nick Middleton could not communicate because no one understood or spoke English. So in the cafe one day he met a person called Norbu. Now Norbu was also interested in doing the Kora. All right. So when they were talking, so I'll just read that conversation. Norbu saw my book when he came in and asked with a gesture if he could sit opposite me at my rickety table. Rickety means poorly made, as if it was about to collapse. You English? He inquired after he had ordered tea. I told him I was, and we struck up a conversation. So thankfully now he has somebody to talk to. I didn't think he was from those parts because he was wearing a windsheeter and metal-rimmed spectacles of a Western style. He was Tibetan, he told me, but he worked in Beijing at the Chinese Academy of Social Sciences in the Institute of Ethnic Literature. I assumed he was on some sort of field work. Yes and no, he said. I have come to do the Kora. My heart jumped. So obviously now the author is extremely jubilant to see that now he has some company. When the time came for me to tell him what brought me to Darchan, his eyes also lit up. We could be a team, he said excitedly, and two academics. They both are, academics. So two academics, he says, who have escaped from the library. Perhaps my positive thinking strategy was working after all. When you take up such treks, when you are going for such treks, one thing which is extremely important is a strong determination, willpower, and optimism in your approach. My initial relief at meeting Nobu, who was also staying in the guest house, was tempered by the realization that he was almost as ill equipped as I was for the pilgrimage. He kept telling me how fat he was and how hard it was going to be. Very high up, he kept reminding me, so tiresome to walk. He wasn't really a practicing Buddhist, it transpired, but he had enthusiasm, and he was, of course, Tibetan. Although I had originally envisaged making the trek in the company of devout believers, on reflection I decided that perhaps Nobu would turn out to be the ideal companion. He suggested we hire some yaks to carry our luggage, which I interpreted as a good sign, and he had no intention of prostrating himself all round the mountain. The prostrating is lying stretched out on the ground with one's face upwards. Okay, so he had no desire of doing that. Not possible, he cried, collapsing across the table in a hysterical laughter. It wasn't his style, and anyway his tummy was too big to do that. Okay. Now, this travelogue Silk Road children transports us from our classrooms to the gently rolling hills of Rabu, and we feel as if we are also a part of Nick Middleton's journey to Mount Kailash, and we are also completing the Kora with him. So basically, the author has taken a challenging trek. He has an acute observation and a knack of giving detailed descriptions of his observations, which we thoroughly enjoyed. Now, traveling to different parts of the world really broadens our horizons, and we must do that. I hope you understood the chapter, you enjoyed listening to it, and reading and explanation part was something which you really enjoyed. Thank you for watching.